Hello and welcome to Art Laughs with me, Verity Babs. Today I spoke to Rory O'Keeffe.
I'm Rory. I'm a comedian and writer, but mainly a recipient of the self-employed government scheme right now. That's how I feel. So I just sit here these days looking at paintings.
Amazing. And what kind of thing do you write?
So probably the weirdest thing I wrote, not the funniest, was an interactive mobile game where you are a contestant on the X Factor and you are trying to win, and you can choose to be like, no mum, I want to be a star, or fuck off mum, it's my dream, or yes, or the neutral option, yes, let's practice singing. And so I would write the scripts and do the different branches, and
Nice.
that was something fun to write. But I also write my own stand-up shows and live shows and sitcom scripts that never get made, but are sometimes read, mostly by me, over and over.
In the dark.
In the dark,
Rocking
yeah.
back and forth.
I just want to write the X Factor again.
Fuck off, Mum. But you have chosen a piece of art for us today. Not your first choice of artwork, granted.
No,
Which was
I want the record to show I'm very cool and on the pulse, and I wanted to choose Gentileschi because if you're London based, there's an exhibition that I think is still going ahead next month. I was pipped to the post.
Vicky Hawley.
I know. And then I thought, because obviously I'm naturally a narcissist, like probably everyone you're talking to, I thought maybe I'll pick Georgia O'Keeffe because that's my surname. And that's the artist I knew about for longest because it's got two F's and that's how you spell my name. But then I thought too many issues because it's often quite sexual paintings of flowers and my parents had it above their bed and I didn't really want to think about that.
But you have chosen
Yes.
a lovely bit of street art.
Yes, by Roa, so capital R, capital O, capital A. Because I lived in Rome a couple of years ago, and this is a piece of street art in Rome. I didn't know who it was by, and I think that's the interesting thing about street art, unless it's like obviously a Banksy or someone trying to be Banksy. You just go, that's the wolf on the wall.
Exactly. That's the thing. I think street artists have to accept the fact that they'll have made something amazing, but they're probably not going to get accredited for it or whatever. I mean,
yeah, or even someone's going to spray over it with their some 12-year-old kid with his name.
Well, exactly. You've got to sort of just be up for that. I remember I loved street art when I was a teenager. I was very angsty and thought this was like the way to go. And I went on a street art tour, and apparently lots of artists, if they have a tally at the bottom of the piece, it's a tally of how many times passers-by who've seen them do the work have asked if they're Banksy.
Really?
Yeah.
No way. Well, it's like a little chalk tally with lines.
Yeah, it's like 3 times someone asked me if I was Banksy while I was doing this.
They should put how many times they said yes, and then what happened.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah. Did you do street art, or do you just like watching it?
Yeah, it was part of a whole sort of edgy image of, art for the people and this kind of stick it to the man. It was very shut up, mum.
Yes.
So I remember being 16 and having some little, you can buy those packs of like sticker paper that you put in your own printer. And I remember printing off some stickers that I'd put around the place. But my edgy street art name was Bev, B-E-V, because it's my initials backwards. And I like the idea of it being like a little old lady called Bev. Being like...
I was going to ask, was it like Babsy? Was it Bev? I couldn't have asked for better.
So good.
That's like in French they do that. They like swap the initials, like a cool street language. So you didn't even know, you were tapping into like French street culture.
I'm really happy that someone's picked street art because it's been a long time coming. So I always find it so interesting to see what people have picked. This is the first. You are the first street artist we've had on. And this is something that you would just walk past.
I spent the first month living in Rome, living in a neighborhood just across like a bridge from this area. So I saw it pretty early on. But what I should say, I was actually there working. I was teaching English, but I was also working for a street art publisher. So really, I should have asked them, like, where do I see the best street art and who is this person who's done it? But I never did. I just thought, oh, that's a really cool piece of street art. And I Googled it literally to choose it for this, and found out that the guy always does animals that are kind of native to the area, or some interesting story. So obviously with a wolf. The myth is that like Romulus and Remus, who founded Rome, they were like raised by a wolf. So there's lots of like old Roman statues of wolves.
Cool.
And so it's pretty cool that it's kind of just there as a symbol. And I think everyone in the area kind of likes it for that reason.
So working for the street art publishers, was that a sort of introduction to street art and just happened to be what that publishers was doing, or is that something you've always been really interested in?
No, I had to seriously blag my way during the interview because I wasn't like you. I wasn't running around Northamptonshire spraying against.
Yeah, he's no Bev.
No Bev. I literally just thought that street art was stupid and a crime. Was my attitude towards it. And I think some of it can still be pretty stupid, but it did help me appreciate it a bit more. And in Rome, I think it was kind of like quite a big deal. Like people, when I told Italians I met that I worked for this company, they were quite interested and they knew some of the names I would say. And I can't, apart from Banksy, I'm not really that into art, so I'm sure there are people who know the British street artists or whatever, but people seem to know who I was talking about. I interviewed a couple, and it was really interesting hearing about like how they work. And I suppose there's a difference between tagging Bev around the local Northampton things and these sort of what you have now, these huge murals with this one not so much, it's very black and white. It's but then there are some who are really colourful and basically it's sort of like a watercolour painting on a huge wall, which I think is really cool. And again, that whole thing about it being publicly accessible, and yes, it can sound a bit edgy and like, screw the man, we're going to paint on a wall. But ultimately, I think, it's great. There's a wolf on that building and it is a piece of art that everyone can look at.
Yeah, I think that's the difficult thing of, obviously street art sort of encapsulates everything. So from the very beginning of street art, of it being like tagging, so putting your initials, your name on, in New York on the sub, what's it called? The sub trains.
The subway.
It's the subway. They're on the subway.
You're doing so well. I was like, is he okay? She gotta say subway.
Damn.
The sub trains, the under metro.
Yeah. The Sur Metro. Just about. On the subways, and that encapsulates that whole scene and the culture of street art. And then there are these things that almost edge into fine art, which are like the piece you've picked, which are very painterly, and if that was on a canvas, people probably would buy it. And Banksy obviously has transitioned between those zones of like doing street art for the sake of street art and now being like, but I could also get it sold at Christie's for many millions of pounds. So it's a weird realm to sort of be able to say you like or you don't like, because it's so many things, I guess.
Yeah, I don't really buy the Banksy sort of, where he did that piece. I think I was in Rome when this piece self-destructed, the one that printed through the shredded, and like my boss was like, you got to write this up immediately. And apparently it was supposed to completely destroy itself, then it half destroyed itself. But the whole fuss around him and like, he just seems to be completely co-opted by the art world, and I don't think he can sort of satirize it anymore.
It's hard. I think I remember the shredding and going, this is the last thing, surely. And he's done recently some really lovely stuff with migrant boat refuge, and so I don't necessarily think he's a bad guy, but I think potentially he's come to the end of his run. Like when it was interesting, the shredding as well, because people were like, okay, is that either has he shredded it to devalue it, the piece is broken, but actually you could sell those individual strips for 3 times the price of the original thing as a whole, because it's it's a performance art now. I think his anonymity has really been his saving grace. I think the main thing people were obsessed with about that shredding was he was probably in the room to press the button to make the call.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, it just increased the whole value of it, so it kind of became disappeared up its own arse as like a comment. Obviously, he still does great stuff like the migrant stuff, and he's got a platform, and that's great. But yeah, what I don't like about art is it's like valuation and how much it costs, and it just seems to alienate most people. Like I read this book called What Good Are the Arts by John Carey, and it had all this interesting stuff about, I think, like some of Tracy Emin's works burnt down in a fire, and also Mark Quinn's skull filled with his own blood, like was left in a fridge unplugged and like melted. And obviously the reaction of all the tabloid press and most people was like, that's hilarious, because it's just, well, how's it worth £2 million? And I do think it just, that whole young British artist thing just meant people sort of pointing at art and thinking, how is that worth this much? And it became too bound with the value of art. And I think street art being just publicly available, it's different to just having, oh, you can go to a gallery for free, oh, art is still publicly available. It's different from that because it's still detached from those sort of gatekeepers and deciding who gets to be put on. And also, you know, you got to be able to have the money and the time to travel to go to a gallery. So I think it's great that, if anything, the quality of street art has stopped from being a sort of graffiti thing to, like, there's actually now loads of great art all around for people to look at.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I, like, in my jobs in like selling commercial art and this kind of thing, or selling contemporary art, there's always this question, you know, how do you make these galleries accessible? And, you know, it's actually quite hard to explain to people why just a gallery being free does not mean that that's accessible, in terms of, like, I think most of the central London Mayfair galleries are free to walk in. That's sort of not enough. And I think it's things like street art, especially if you're, you know, growing up in a big city and you don't necessarily have access to going to these galleries as like a part of your life. Just experiencing visual culture sort of without any choice, I think, is probably enriching, I guess. And, you know, even the creative thing of, you know, teenage boys going out and you know, spray painting their name, that is a sort of creative let out, which, you know, I think, like, art lessons in school are very strict and very like, you must learn how to draw the apple exactly like the apple looks, etc. So it's probably, I don't know, I think it's probably quite a good thing, this sort of rebelliousness of it. But, like, you're right, the idea of, yeah, Banksy's being kind of plied off a wall and put into Christie's is all a bit perverse.
Yeah, no, the book was mentioning stuff like that as well. It's like, I think they, in the 19th century, they tried to move the National Gallery further west to, like, Kensington, so that the works of art wouldn't be polluted by the air. And there was this huge debate, because then they were like saying, well, poor people can't walk to see it if it's all the way in Kensington. And there was a similar debate in World War II where they, like, evacuated the paintings to Wales. But obviously they did evacuate some people, but, you know, kind of showed, like, their priorities. And basically, yeah, I think art is more useful as an art lesson or as those kids doing something than it is as Christie's or commercially buying it. And so, yeah, it's kind of crazy. I haven't done art since school. We just stopped drawing, you know, we stopped doing these things. But, like, in lockdown, I think a lot of people rediscovered it. That should be the priority, is like, what art's use is you doing it. And so, yeah, seeing a wolf on a wall, if you're a kid, for example, you've drawn I don't know, because you're Roman and you've got wolves all over your house, so you've drawn one, and then you see, oh, you could actually grow up and do it on a wall. Well, I have no idea how you do it. Is another question about these huge murals.
Yeah, exactly. And it's very interesting in terms of methodology and stuff like that. So a lot of street artists, you know, if you're doing something very painterly, they're like their billboard paper that are pre-printed, and then you go out that night and you paste it up. Some are doing freehand with actual spray paint, some are using stencils and this kind of thing. And I'm sure that probably within the scene there's probably a hierarchy in terms of, you know, like, he's a really great artist, he does all of that freehand, versus people who just print out a stencil or basically print out a sticker. You mentioned not being so into art, or art not necessarily being a big player in your life. Is that something that's sort of always been the case, or as a child were you sort of encouraged to go into these things? Your dad's an author, isn't he?
Yes, yeah, he is.
Creativity in general, and, you know, in the jobs that you now do, were clearly acceptable in your household. Were the arts generally sort of like held up and praised?
I think they had a sort of, like, they didn't want to me to be like a wanky art fan, or like, also like I've never listened to classical music in my life either. Whereas in other ways, I'm also very stereotypically like privileged and high culture. You know, I've read all these books or whatever, but never with like art or opera, all that stuff. So I think they had some sort of aversion to it, which I sort of carried on. And I guess I'm quite verbal. Like when I'm in an exhibition, I always need the like plaque to tell me what to think or like what's going on, which I can find really frustrating. I know you can just not look at the plaque and just appreciate the art and then read about it later if you want, but I always find myself resorting to words. Like I need to know something, and I always find that weird how you don't have that when you're reading like a novel. There's not a little plaque in the side being like, oh, it was written in Arial 12-point font, and this paragraph indent means this.
But the equivalent in books is for kids being like, the frog crossed the road, and then there is a picture of the frog crossing the road. It's the other way around.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, I think potentially some people are just wired to be like, the words are the way forward, and some people it's just wired visually. So I realise I just don't have the attention span to read. I've never read for pleasure. I was raised in a house of books and my parents read and that kind of thing. But it's just never been something I've been able to do or chosen to do. And I think that probably is that I'm just more wired to, I need some pictures. I haven't read books since there were pictures in the books. But I think with galleries as well, it's hard to, I think sometimes people think that if I've read the plaque, if I've read the little caption, I've admitted defeat to this overlord of art who understands art, and you don't, you little reader. So actually, I think captions are interesting because some galleries are like, we don't have captions because it interrupts the viewing experience. But actually, if you're like, I just want to know what's going on, I just want to know who did this, what their deal was, you know, if captions didn't exist and no one had heard of Van Gogh, we probably wouldn't be half as interested. But at least having a caption going, he was so sad and he did mad things, that at least helps you get what he's getting.
Just a frowny emoji, at least, just next to
at least an emoji. Rory, thank you so much for joining me today. Could you just let us know where it's best to follow you and hear from you about what you're getting up to?
Oh yes, I'm on Twitter. It's at Rory O'Keeffe, which I regret because it's quite hard. But just type my name, you'll find it. And Instagram, so at Rory O'Keeffe 3. And I have a website, roryok.co.uk, that my uncle made for me, and I need to check whether it's up to date. So there you go. And I'll be out spraying next to security cameras. Bev
was here.
Criminate you. Bev was here with a Z.
Thanks so much for watching. You can follow Rory in the ways written below, and as per usual, you can follow me at VerityBabsArt on Instagram. Please do give us a subscribe and a comment and a like and a share, and I'll see you next time.